Michael Jordan has a net worth estimated at over $3 billion. Not from basketball. Think about that for a second. The greatest basketball player who ever lived made most of his fortune after he stopped playing basketball. And the teammates who stood next to him, who sweated through the same championships, who gave their bodies to the same franchise, many of them are still waiting for the game to pay them back. It never did. But here's the question nobody seems to want to ask. Was that an accident? To understand how Michael Jordan became the first athlete billionaire in American history, you have to go back, not just to Chicago, not just to the 1990s, but to a moment in American capitalism that quietly changed everything. The 1980s were a turning point. Corporate America had just discovered something powerful. Celebrity sells. Not just products, identity, lifestyle, aspiration. Nike, at the time, was a struggling shoe company. Adidas dominated. Converse owned basketball. Nike was the underdog with a plan and not much else. Then, in 1984, they made a bet. They signed a 21-year-old rookie from North Carolina to a deal reportedly worth around $2.5 million over 5 years, with one condition that had never been tried before in sports. His own signature shoe line, the Air Jordan 1, launched in 1985. The NBA immediately fined Jordan $1,000 every single game he wore them. The shoes violated the league's uniform policy. Nike paid every fine, gladly, because the controversy was the marketing. What the NBA didn't realize was that they had just handed Nike the greatest advertising campaign in the history of consumer culture, and they were funding it themselves. Most players of Jordan's generation saw basketball as the destination. Jordan, according to those who worked with him, saw it as the vehicle. His agent, David Falk, reportedly helped engineer a business approach that was almost unheard of in 1984. Demand equity, demand royalties, demand ownership, not just a paycheck. The Nike contract Jordan signed wasn't a standard endorsement deal. It included royalties on every shoe sold, which meant the more Air Jordans flew off the shelves, the more money landed in Michael Jordan's bank account, while he slept, while he practiced, while he played. In his first year alone, the Air Jordan line reportedly generated around $126 million in revenue for Nike. Jordan's cut of that dwarfed his actual NBA salary. And here's where it starts to get uncomfortable. Because while Jordan was quietly becoming one of the most sophisticated commercial operations in American sports history, his teammates were operating under an entirely different set of rules. Rules that, it turns out, were designed to work against them. Between 1991 and 1998, the Chicago Bulls won 6 NBA championships. Jordan won 6 Finals MVPs. The dynasty was real, and it was dominant. But behind the spectacle, something else was being constructed. Jordan's Nike deal evolved. By the mid-1990s, estimates suggest he was earning tens of millions per year from shoe royalties alone. The Jordan brand eventually spun off from Nike, became its own category, generating over $1 billion annually in revenue. He added Gatorade, Wheaties, Hanes, McDonald's, eventually his own production company, a stake in an NBA franchise. Each deal was structured not as a celebrity appearance, but as a business partnership, with equity, ownership, and long-term upside. Meanwhile, the average NBA player's career lasts approximately 4.5 years, and the average NBA player, statistically, is broke within 5 years of retirement. That number has been cited widely by financial advisors, by former players, by documentaries. Whether the exact figure is debatable, the pattern is not. The machine that made Michael Jordan rich was not the machine that was supposed to take care of everyone else. And the question is, who built that machine? And who made sure the exits were locked? In 1983, the NBA and the Players Association agreed to something called the salary cap, a limit on how much any team could spend on player salaries. On the surface, it was sold as competitive balance, fairness, preventing rich teams from buying every title. What it actually created was a ceiling not on team spending. Teams found ways around it constantly, but on individual player earnings. While league revenues exploded through the 1990s and 2000s, the cap kept player salaries structurally limited relative to the growth happening around them. Jordan himself, during the Bulls' final dynasty run, earned a reported $33 million in the 1997-98 season, enormous by any standard, a historic contract for its time. His teammates earned fractions of that. Scottie Pippen, arguably the second best player on those championship teams, signed a long-term contract years earlier that left him earning around $2.8 million in seasons where Jordan was making 10 times as much. Pippen has spoken publicly about feeling financially exploited by the Bulls' management. He's described the contract as a mistake, one he made young, one the organization benefited from for years. That's not a story about Pippen's poor judgment. That's a story about leverage, about who had it and who didn't. And Michael Jordan, it must be said, had leverage that no one else in the building possessed. Because Michael Jordan was the product that the entire system was selling. After his second retirement in 1998, Jordan didn't disappear. He moved to the other side of the table. He became a minority owner of the Washington Wizards. Later, the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets, making him, for a time, the first black majority owner of a major American sports franchise. That fact carries weight. It's historically significant, and it's genuinely impressive. But it also raises a question that sports media rarely asks out loud. How many of the players Jordan competed against, players who came from the same neighborhoods, the same circumstances, the same dreams, ended up on the other side of that ownership equation? The answer, almost universally, is none. According to various financial reports over the years, a substantial portion of NBA players experience significant financial difficulty after retirement. Some file for bankruptcy. Others deal with fraud from advisors who saw them coming. Others simply run out of money before they run out of years. Jordan, meanwhile, built a system that generates income indefinitely. The Jordan brand alone, the shoe line he pioneered, has reportedly earned him over $1 billion in royalties over its lifetime. $1 billion from shoes that other people buy, that other athletes now wear. There's a version of this story that's a triumph, and there's a version that asks why the triumph had to be so singular. Scottie Pippen's autobiography, released in 2021, reignited conversations about compensation inequality within the Bulls dynasty. Pippen described feeling undervalued, underpaid, and, at times, used. He wasn't alone in that sentiment. Horace Grant, Dennis Rodman, and other contributors to the Bulls championships have, at various points in interviews, reflected on the financial disparity of that era. The way one player's commercial explosion didn't lift the boats around him. To be clear, Jordan didn't set his teammates' salaries. The Bulls' ownership did. The NBA's structure did. Jordan isn't responsible for Pippen's contract, but what's worth examining is the silence around it at the time. The media that covered Jordan's rise as pure mythology, rarely asking who paid for the myth. The league that celebrated its golden goose, while the players around him operated without the same financial infrastructure. Former players like Charles Barkley have spoken at length about how unprepared most athletes are for life after basketball. Not because they're reckless, but because no one in the system has a structural incentive to prepare them. The team owners profit. The league profits. The agents take their percentage and move on. Nike profits. And when the career ends, most players are handed a watch and a thank you note. Let's put some context around what we're talking about. The NBA's total revenue in 1990 was approximately $900 million. By 2023, that figure had grown to an estimated $10 billion. That's more than a tenfold increase over 3 decades. Player salaries grew substantially during that period. But the structure of how that money flows and who captures the long-term value tells a different story. Jordan's Nike royalty model created a template, but it remained, for decades, deeply unusual. Most players sign endorsement deals that pay them a flat fee, not a percentage of ongoing revenue. The distinction is enormous. A flat fee ends. A royalty compounds. LeBron James, often cited as Jordan's modern heir, negotiated a lifetime deal with Nike, reportedly worth over $1 billion. It took 30 years after Jordan's original deal to see another athlete approach that structure. 30 years. In those 30 years, thousands of NBA players came and went, signed standard deals, made their salaries, left the game and discovered that the financial infrastructure they assumed existed largely didn't. Sports financial advisors have documented the patterns extensively. Predatory financial advisors targeting athletes, family members expecting financial support, tax obligations that players weren't prepared for, businesses that failed, investments that collapsed. The system produced one Michael Jordan, and then it produced the conditions for everyone else. Michael Jordan is, by any measure, one of the greatest athletes and one of the savviest commercial minds in American history. Those two things are both true. What's also true is that his rise happened inside a system of leagues, unions, salary caps, endorsement structures, media narratives, and corporate partnerships that was not neutral. It was designed to produce enormous value. The question of who captures that value and who gets left at the door is not a question the system was designed to answer fairly. Jordan understood that earlier and more clearly than almost anyone around him. He had brilliant advisors. He had leverage no one else had. He had a product, himself, that companies desperately needed, and he knew how to price it. But he was also the exception that made the rule look acceptable. When people point to Jordan and say, "Look what's possible," what they sometimes fail to mention is that for every Jordan, there are thousands of players who went through the same system, gave the same years, broke the same bones, and came out the other side with very different outcomes. Not because they were less talented, not because they were reckless, but because the architecture of the game was never designed to make them rich. It was designed to make the game rich. Jordan just figured out how to become the game. The rules of the game were written before anyone stepped on the court. Jordan just read them first.